I've just finished setting up my new studio. Today I'm going to explain to you what it's like to move house with all of this stuff, plus show some of the custom parts I've made to create an organized makerspace. I'm in the fortunate position where I have a lot of great stuff, and that means I can make a lot of interesting things, but it also means I've been going for weeks in moving it all to a new address. I've been sharing my progress with my patrons, but in this video we'll go through my efforts in creating the ultimate home makerspace. Here's a clip from my first video, and as you can see, teaching tech started in a small bedroom, and that was okay because I only had a couple of printers in the room at that time. But as I started to review more and more machines, things became incredibly cramped, and I often found myself taking over other parts of the house to complete work for the channel. So as the channel grew, it justified moving to a bigger room in the house, the room that the majority of my videos have been shot in. And it was a much bigger room, at the time having ample space to accommodate all of my stuff. I built the center tables, the big bench across the back that all of the printers sit on, and some other storage shelves that you couldn't see on camera to hold things like ovens, dehydrators, and materials. But inevitably I got more stuff, such as my CO2 laser or my precious plastic shredder, all of which were taking up space. I would generally crop a shot like this, but as you can see, there's stuff jammed into every corner of the room. And this is the good side of the room. The side that the camera never faces was even worse. So when we were looking to move house, a suitable area to run the channel was a priority. And the house we've moved to ticks that box and then some, with this downstairs living area being ideal to be the main studio for teaching tech. The width of the room is actually a couple of centimeters narrower, but the length is about a meter longer, and that makes it much easier to park laser cutters and CNC routers on the sides. But the main advantage are the rooms off to the side from here, which I can utilize to work more efficiently. Having this bedroom off to the side gives me a place to put my editing desk away from the noise of 3D printers. This desk, which is quite large, was previously jammed into the same room, which ate up a lot of space. A huge bonus is that this bedroom has a walk-in wardrobe to the side, and for me that meant having a dedicated storage room for a lot of my more obscure equipment. And as a bonus, off the laundry and underneath the stairs was a nice storage area that would be perfect for me to set up all of my resin printing. A lot of potential, but a heap of work required, starting with actually moving everything. As you saw earlier, all of my benches and tables are made together from this hammered together garage storage system. That means a rubber mallet was all I needed to break each item apart. There were many ute loads for each section of the room, comprising of racking parts, tabletops, and whatever those particular benches were holding. And when I got to the other end, which was fortunately only 10 minutes drive away, it was simply a matter of hammering everything back together into the correct configuration. But a lot of this stuff is heavy. For instance, these 8 metal drawers are 15 kilograms when empty, but I didn't want to empty them because that was just wasted time. So let's just say I got in much better shape carrying all of these items down the stairs. I also learned from this experience that 3D printers are a really awkward item to transport by car. However, with perseverance, even through torrential rain, trip by trip, the old room started to look like this, and the new room started to look like this. Surprisingly, perhaps the worst thing to move was my big editing desk and computer. This thing is surprisingly heavy, and I even had to trim down the left-hand side to fit into this corner. Physically heavy, but ultimately straightforward stuff, whereas other aspects needed fabrication as I went. Firstly, that resin printing area under the stairs. It took somewhere between 2 to 3 hours to clean out all of the resin from the vats, so I could safely transport all of the resin equipment without any risk of spillage. Getting the main components in was easy, but it was the finishing touches that took some time. In a previous video, I showed off my resin printing setup inside a cupboard in the original house. This included things like an inbuilt exhaust fan to extract the fumes from the resin, and efficient mounting of all of the tools I needed on the inside of the cupboard doors, including some custom designed and 3D printed parts to hold specialist equipment. Well, the new area didn't have any doors and I didn't want to drill into the walls, so I considered 3D printing some adapters to go on this metal frame. But fortunately I realized a much simpler solution was to screw on a large piece of MDF to act as a backplate and then bolt all of my custom parts directly to that. That means no drilling holes in walls, and there's still plenty of space for everything that I need, including the all-important hooks for putting the lid of the printer on to keep it out of the way. As before, all of the hand tool holsters are removable, so I can move them across the room without dripping resin or cleaner anywhere. On the shelf with the actual printer, I've left more empty space. This gives me room to review other printers, and more general work area is always a handy thing. My original printed parts are still installed to store all of my spare vats, as well as a spare Wham Bam printer bed. The ultrasonic cleaner as well as the curing station have moved to a separate table, and there's little shelves underneath for other spare parts. Finally, we had an exhaust fan fitted to extract the fumes just like before. Don't get me wrong, it is tight under here, but there's still room for everything that I need, and importantly, all of this is kept away from the family. The resin printing area was actually quite straightforward compared to what needed to happen for the storage room. As you can see, this was built to store clothes, not any of my equipment. I had to detach the existing components from the wall, relocate them, and screw everything into place. That freed up the end of the room for me to install my old general purpose shelving. And with the help of some simple 3D printed marking brackets, I was able to prepare several pieces of MDF with the clearance needed to fit the existing shelving. These pieces were mounted vertically using some 3D printed brackets, and level by level I was able to build some compartments for material storage, and this is something I've desperately needed for some time now. On the left hand side, I cut some shelves to length, modifying them to suit specialist equipment such as my plastic shredder. This gives me a dedicated area for filament recycling, with the main shredder feeding into a collection bin, and then my new Protocycler Plus filament extruder above on its own dedicated shelf, with other compartments for things like ovens, filament dryers, kilns, polishing machines, tumblers, heat presses, dry boxes, and so forth. Most of this stuff was previously on the floor around the old room, so this new room is a huge plus for me. Sometimes the things you need the most just aren't that glamorous. And for me, that's storage, because those heavy metal drawers were full of different spare parts, all mixed in together, apart from being in Ziploc bags. And my center tables are also full of poorly organized things. I used these little plastic trays that honestly were pretty hopeless at containing various cords and parts. I also used these small plastic tubs for other tools and spares, but stupidly, they didn't actually fit out of the openings, so the only access was to slide them past each other and then out these gaps in the end. I needed something better, and this was the perfect time to do it, so here's the plan. Create a series of custom drawers that fully utilize the available space, 22 in total. In Onshape, I drew up these simple plywood drawers, and I ran everything off variables, so I could accommodate the larger drawers by changing just one number. I then exported DXFs to Lightburn, where I could plan what pieces would fit on the cutting bed, and also how many sheets of plywood I needed. Before I could start, I had to 3D print a new adapter for the laser spume extraction, and run the hose out a crack in the door, as there's no cap flap in the glass as of yet. It was then time to go laser cutting, and I designed around 7mm ply because I figured it was the thinnest I could get away with while still maintaining a reasonable feed rate to push all of the parts through. A set of parts like this takes around 10 minutes to cut, and with 88 laser cut pieces in total, I was able to produce all of the parts needed in under a day. For the drawer bases, I used 3mm MDF, with a table saw being a very efficient way of cutting the pieces down to size. Putting together the drawers was easily the most time consuming part, mainly because the gluing for each set needed overnight to dry properly. I had enough sash clamps to glue 5 at a time, so this process stretched out over a week. At first, I took steps to ensure squareness, but I quickly realized that the 7mm plywood was too flexible and it was pretty much a waste of time. So I wiped off the excess glue and waited until the next day to rectify the problem. The bases were simply designed to be nailed on, and I would get one edge aligned perfectly before flexing the frame of the drawer back and forth to get it square and driving home the rest of the nails. At this stage, the drawers were close to done. I didn't allow for the curve of the laser, so the finger joint sat a little proud, so I used a random orbital sander to get everything nice and flat, with the finished sides looking nice and tidy. And that's how I made my new plywood drawers. They won't win any awards, but they are exactly what I needed. They're designed to angle in and then slide into place. There's a handle at the front to pull them in and out, and the back lip prevents them falling onto the floor if they're pulled out too far. Next comes the fun bit, actually loading the drawers with all of my equipment. For instance, this drawer getting power supplies as well as power adapters, and this drawer getting spare heated beds, glass plates and build surfaces. Drawer by drawer, I was able to ditch the old system, much more efficient and I think reasonable looking too. The new drawers have also freed up more room for tools and things like filament, which were previously overflowing. Probably the only downside is that 2 of the drawers are obstructed by the lowrider when it's homed, so I filled those drawers with objects that I'll rarely need, and I still can lift the lowrider 2 up and out of the way to access them. The bulk of the work was over, so just the finishing touches remained. Before I could film this video, I needed the little touches, such as my sponsor logos, as well as my YouTube silver play button, and it would have been quite easy to forget safety features, such as reinstalling my smoke alarm. My adapted monitor stand, which holds my lights and microphone, was pretty bulky and blocking more drawers, so I converted each side to slot directly into the table, easily removable for lowrider CNC use, with less clutter and better access to the drawers. I also rotated the center benches 90 degrees, so there's no longer an awkward gap between the benches for my studio shots. But as I recorded some test footage, it still seemed a bit bare, and I think that's because the brick wall from the old room adds a lot of color and texture. So to combat this, I bought a pair of inexpensive ceiling RGB spotlights, designed and then printed these adjustable brackets, so the lights could clip onto the rear of the back bench and literally add some color to the shot. It's not quite the same as the old brick wall, but at least it's a start. Of course, there is still more to do. Some of the printers were unfortunately damaged during the move and need some printed parts remade, and I've still got many drawers of spare parts that I need to go through and put away neatly. The biggest job, however, is underneath the studio, where there's underhouse storage that I intend to fill with a second workshop with all of my power tools. There's actually a lot of room down here, but as you can see, the floor is not level, and so far I've done 1 wheelbarrow load of digging out the soft dirt, and there's many more needed before this area will be ready to set up. Perhaps that will be the subject of a future video. That's it, for now at least. I've got a lot more little things to do, but ultimately I'm really excited to be creating content for you from this new space. If you've got any suggestions on this camera angle, the lighting, anything like that, please let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy creating your ultimate makerspace.
G'day, it's Michael again. If you liked the video, then please click like. If you want to see more content like this in future, click subscribe and make sure you click on the bell to receive every notification. If you really want to support the channel and see exclusive content, become a patron. Visit my Patreon page. See you next time.